For anyone that hasn't had the experience, long-term insomnia is an almost indescribable state. In media, they always describe it as a total lack of sleep. That's bullshit. After about 2 weeks of no sleep, you are dead. But that isn't really the horror of insomnia. That's, relatively speaking, a quick bullet in the back of the head. The true scary shit is the slow torture and mental devolution of a few weeks with 1 or 3 hours sleep. Strangely, your brain adapts better than your body. Sure, you're not firing on all cylinders, but you make the best of the ones you have. The toll on your body, though, you wind up with everything from chronic colds to symptoms of diabetes. See, your brain is being selfish. It makes sure its grayed, wrinkled self is taken care of first and foremost. Your other bodily systems left to fend for themselves. And that is where I'm at the start of the newest chapter of my journey through surprisingly polite hell. $30,000 deposited that night. More money than I see some years. And no one tried to eat me, no soul removal or being turned into a doll or anything. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread and anxiety I found myself with. For a month and a half, I blacked out my apartment windows, doubled back on every trip out of the house, and made eye contact with every stranger on the street. Was I worried about some militia or a group of hellspawn that could find out I'm under said group of assholes' thumb? Take your pick. For 45 days, I was staring down every guy over 6 foot and taking a hilarious amount of cliché anti-supernatural measures. But 45 days of relative peace started to make me think neither of these groups had much more use for me. I almost lowered my mental guard, but then I got the phone call. A slap fight? Seriously? You ghost me for 2 months and offer a slap fight, I say to Harold with a sarcastic laugh. Not a slap fight like that. Do you not watch YouTube? I'm talking a brutal offense-only match. And sorry for not calling. Did 30 grand not provide you with a comfortable living standard? You are not our only fighter, Harold chides me. No, I don't watch YouTube, actually, I say, opening my ancient laptop and searching the term. I ignore Harry's further gripes and watch a few professional slapping matches while he rants. He was not kidding. 2 big bastards throwing giant open-handed haymakers into each other's face. Knockouts are common and don't necessarily end the fight, and the injuries look brutal. Everything from dislodged eyes to friction burn. I completely understand. You couldn't be more right, I interject, trying to calm his tirade. So, just gave it browse. If the pay is as good as last time, I'm in. In truth, I want to say no, regardless of the pay. Problem being, turning down a figure like that is sure to raise suspicion. Not to mention, if those militia assholes are bugging my phone or anything, they may not take too kindly to me turning down an opportunity. You didn't hear a word I said, did you? Whatever. Meet me at Jim's and we'll work on the details. I walk to Jim's, wanting to give myself some time to clear my head. By the time I walk in the door and get greeted by a few regulars, I'm fairly certain I'm not acting suspicious. Harold comes out of his office, and while he doesn't say anything, the look he gives my blown-out-looking self tells me all I need to know. Rough night, kid, he says casually. Rough few, actually, I say with a grin I force to make to my eyes. Well, hope you like hitting faces as much as the bottle. Harold leads me back to his office as he begins to explain. Don't you think size is at a bit of an advantage in a slap fight? I say, taking a seat at his desk. On it sits a computer that looks old enough to legally buy alcohol, and a few files with pictures attached. I do, but you ain't fighting size this time. Another human, mostly, is going to be your opponent. We're making this a team-based match. America versus Russia. 1 human, 1 wild card, and 1 champion each side. First team down 3 loses. Pay will be double if you're interested. Harold smiles as he sees my eyes widen. I am, depending on what you mean by mostly, I say, trying to give myself a reasonable out. Nothing to worry about. They call themselves heroes. We tend to call them a lot less complimentary things. The vast majority are genocidal pricks who come from families who have been given a little something and think that makes it their goal in life to kill folks like us. But this guy, he's one of the good ones, and his little something won't come into play. He's got a few pounds on you, but that's about it. Harold starts flipping through the files as I try to keep the fear and shock out of my face. I'm expecting to see the Australian guy from the diner, but the picture is of a very stout, 6-foot-ish, pale guy, 30s, huge beard, and a gut that seems to demand your attention. I can't find a way to argue I'm outclassed. I panic and agree. No problem, I say, cursing myself silently. You have 2 weeks to get back in shape. Looks like you're gonna need it. Another 10 grand if you train up size a bit. Your other teammate, you'll maybe meet him before the match. But I wouldn't hold my breath. Harold starts bringing up something on his computer. You can go now. My mind and heart are in a competition to see which can give out first as I leave the office. I nearly fall over as Size, seemingly out of nowhere, bounds up to me with an extremely off-putting look of glee on his face. We stand as one, easy-going, to hold up that display of impeccable construction, he screams, full volume. Calm down. Literally every word of that flew straight over my head. Let's try that again, I say, leading him over to the corner that is obviously his and his alone. He takes in a few deep breaths and speaks a bit more calmly. Our unneeded assistance is given to those above our station. You're a fan of the other guy on our side? I say, taking a stab at the meaning. Size nods enthusiastically. I can't wait to meet him. Till then, you think you can deal with my unimpressive self? I say with a smirk. A friendly face, an indelible ink. I should think so, he says, patting me on the shoulder. I love our little talks, Size, I say as we try to come up with a training plan for a match format neither of us has experience with. After watching more matches than were strictly necessary, we realized that us sparring against each other is going to be doing no one any favors. So I found someone more or less human-shaped, a rotting, vaguely canine guy who was a lot less obnoxious than his smell, to spar with, while Size picked something that looked like a living, breathing stick person. From there, it was simply a matter of undoing some habits, dodging a blow being one of them, a technical foul and cause for a do-over of the opponent's slap. I split my time between gyms and home this time. Though the workout actually led to some nights with sleep, my precarious situation was always in the back of my mind while training. 4 days before the fight, I got my second bowel-loosening phone call. Listen closely. I will only be telling you this once, the Australian says. I don't know what came over me. I wish I could say it was the opposite, but I'd been getting general information about the heroes under the guise of research for the fight. And from the perspective of anyone I could talk to, they amounted to the paranormal equivalent of skinheads, though there was plenty of not all heroes moments. Not some kind of powerful cabal. I was angry and felt in control. No, you listen. You and the Ghostbusters can take a flying fuck at a rolling donut. You're going to kill my family? When you spend your life pissing off things that could tear you apart? I don't think so. In fact, I think your resources are stretched so thin, your best plan is to try and use a low-end fighter to somehow screw with an abnormal fight promotion. That, mate, is a stupid fucking plan. If I catch a whiff of your folks around me again, I'm going to bring my friends into it. And from what I've seen, they're a lot scarier than yours, I say, building ire and vitriol through my monologue. Looks like we go with Plan B then, he says cryptically as he ends the call. The conversation shook me a bit, but I had confidence in what I was saying. Sometimes I can be such a moron. We never ended up meeting up with our third member until fight night. Size and myself were getting ready in the locker room as Harold and the mysterious third member of our team came in. He was a short guy, about 5'6", dressed in an upscale suit that looked about 80 years out of date. His pitch black hair was slicked back, and he was wearing a somehow dapper, small, flat straw-looking hat. "Buster, meet Terry," Harold says as the man takes off his suit jacket and offers his hand. I shake it and feel a grip like a vise. Size is literally shaking with glee as he produces a piece of aged, stained paper and a pencil that is little more than a stub. With a confident grace, he takes the paper and autographs it. Size puts it inside his black fog-like jacket, and I choose to not ask how exactly that works. We watch our opponents enter the ring to assorted cheers and boos from the crowd. I recognize mine from the photo, looking intimidating in a blue and white striped wife beater and track pants, but the other two are both shocking for different reasons. "Mine," Size says, pointing to a creature that looks like an anorexic human suspended in a rotting placenta. The thing stretches the sack surrounding its emaciated form into whip-like tendrils, cracking them to the delight of the crowd. The third, though, it isn't some horror. It's a small, wobbly-looking old Russian grandmother, wrapped in layers of shawls and blankets. The applause as she simply waves to the crowd can be heard in the locker room. "Her and Buster got quite the rivalry. They had some clashes over territory back in the day," Harold says as we get ready to make our entrance. Buster waves Size and I to go first. I thank him as we walk out and start to go through a well-rehearsed introduction where we put aside our differences to defeat the other team. No one was watching us, though. The second Buster entered, the applause drowned out anything we were saying, and no one's eyes were anywhere but on him. We went through the motions of our introduction as we made our way into the ring, but it was obvious people were there for the spectacle and the big names, not our gimmicks. In the ring were 3 waist-high tables. A stool was provided for the old lady to bring her level with Buster. We stood across from our respective opponents and grabbed the stout bars protruding from the tables with our left hands. There were 3 refs, all absolutely identical looking, to me anyway. Tall, bald men. Each had a twisted, evil-looking face on the back of their skull, in addition to a more standard one where I've always assumed faces always went. The rules were explained by all 3 in unison to the crowd. The cheers began to rise, then subside as they announced the first round. They were saving the best for last, obviously, and started with me and my rotund opponent. No handshake, just a Russian phrase that could just as easily have been good luck or fuck you, as he chalks his hand and lines up his first slap. The blow comes in quick, and I hear it long before the burning pain sets in. I clench the support pole for a moment as I push the pain down. I nod to the ref and line up my own strike. I hit hard. My strike is launched from the hip and hits squarely, raising a red welt on the Russian's face, but he reacts as much as if I attacked him with harsh language. He says something to me in an aggressive tone and draws his finger across his throat, chuckling deeply as the spotlight on us cuts off and one on Size and the placenta thing sparks to life. Size rotates his shoulder and lines up his shot. The slap has the momentum of a freight train, but the jelly-like skin of the thing in front of Size absorbs a lot of the shock. and while it makes a noise like a snapping broom handle, there are no visible signs of injury. The creature does nothing for a moment, and in a flash whips a thick, tapered tentacle towards Size. It hits like a whip, opening a severe gash on his face. He stumbles backward, but doesn't fall. Then the spotlight hits the A squad. The crowd goes wild. Buster wastes no time and winds back a strike that only barely brushes the face of the old lady. There is no way this was anything other than showmanship, I assume. The old lady throws a quick backhand slap in response that tears open Buster's face. A dripping flap of skin hangs for a moment before starting to knit back together. The next 4 rounds are much of the same. Unfortunately for Size, this meant fighting an extremely uphill battle. Buster and I were mostly remaining on even ground with our opponents, but by the 6th round, Size looked like he had been through a blender. I had no idea if he could even see, as both eyes had a large furrow of tissue removed. My answer came with him throwing a slap that hit his opponent solidly on the arm. Before the return strike, he backs away from the platform, waving his hands, metaphorically throwing in the towel. "First point to Russia!" the announcer screams as the crowd cheers and boos. The Russian man says some more indecipherable taunts and whines back. His shot is off target, though, and instead of hitting my face, slams directly into my ear. I hit the ground, holding the side of my head. I'm disoriented and feel like there is a knitting needle driven through my head. One of the refs comes over and inspects my ear. It is judged an unintentional foul, granting me an even strike, but not disqualifying him. I throw the first slap, and finally I see a little flicker in the bastard's dead blue eyes. The next blow comes before his head gets aligned again, and he goes to both knees, grabbing the table to keep from crumpling to the ground. But he holds on, wiping a thin trickle of blood from his mouth. "About time to get this show on the road anyway," he says, just loud enough for me to hear. I never questioned if he knew English, but my heart starts to race. Something is up. Both the old lady and Buster are looking like they got a cement mixer facial, neither being able to keep up the rapid healing pace of the earlier rounds. Buster is done messing around, it seems. He leans backward, using only his ankles, almost becoming parallel to the floor. With a spin that uses every muscle in his body, he launches a slap that builds up from the floor. The sound it made wasn't sharp. It was a wet thud that accompanied his hand caving in half of the old lady's face. There was no call by the refs. Her cutman dragged her twitching body from the ring. Buster was leaning against his podium, obviously broken and winded to some extent himself. He looks over to me, one eye missing, bottom half of his face fleshless, as if to say, "It's up to you now." As the spotlight hits me and my opponent, I see something, pointed and metal, in his right hand. With a movement that only I can see, he stabs the placenta beast, and I hear a pressurized whine. "Should have just went with plan A," he says with a smile. The placenta-wrapped thing makes a shrieking noise and rips its podium from the ring, throwing it into the audience with an audible crunch. I back up as fast as I can. The Russian, on the other hand, looks serene, not breaking eye contact with me as the creature turns its sudden rage on him. The tentacles start to lash him non-stop. Unlike their impact on Size, each blow shatters bone and pulps organs as the man deforms and breaks before my eyes, becoming little more than a leaking sack of meat as the creature slams a tentacle one last time, spraying the ring with gore. "Cut the lights, cut the cameras, and get everyone out of here!" I hear Harold scream as we are plunged into darkness. As my eyes adjust, I see that the thin human form in the sack glows subtly green. Thankfully, I can see the thing that will certainly kill me. I can barely make Buster out, but he still looks hurting. Regardless, he charges the thing, moving faster than I could on my best day. Unrestrained, his blows hit like battering rams, the form in the sack being tossed around as it is struck. I feel like I should try and help. I rush in and get hit a few times, light, glancing blows I don't see. When I get close enough to make out the creature's limbs, I grab a tentacle and began to yank, trying to get it off balance. I feel many more slapping against my stomach and chest, but they don't seem to be connecting well. I grab tighter, twisting the limb around my body. My muscles burn, but Buster seems to be winning the fight. The form inside has limbs floating unattached, a deformed skull and ribs that look like a crushed pile of matchsticks. Buster starts to rip and tear, burrowing through the creature like a mole. It screams and thrashes, but as the lithe, deadpan guy jams his upper half into the ragged hole he has made, the creature discorporates into reeking liquid and clattering bone. I fall to the ground, suddenly unimpeded. The lights turn back on, and the first thing I see is a nearly empty arena. The second is Buster, looking like a skinned hare. The third is just how wrong I was about those glancing hits. My stomach is nothing more than torn sinew, white and gray bulges I hope are not organs showing through. There is a deep puncture mark under my left lung, leaking blood at an alarming rate. Shock wears off, and I lose consciousness. I awake with a deep, burning pain in my stomach, and a man in a surgical garb that appears to also be wearing clown makeup, stitching up my stomach. "Easy there. I didn't go to 12 years of medical school to hurt you," he says, annoyed. I'm about 3/4 stitched up and still looking at parts that should be left unseen. The doctor turns behind him and begins to talk to someone I can't see. He's fine. Gonna have one hell of a scar, though. But why on earth have you been... The doctor is interrupted by a voice. Harold's voice. "He's fine now, though. Besides the stitch job," Harold says. "He could probably do it himself at this..." The doctor is interrupted again. Harold grabs his head and turns it 180 degrees. As the body drops, he yanks again, removing the clown's head. He drops it, walking over to the table I'm on, and tossing me a spool of thick black thread and a thick needle. "We have a lot to talk about, kid," he says in a tone that barely suppresses his rage.